I'm recording this on October 3rd, so I had to give you all a little pink moment for Mean Girls Day. Hi, my name is Adriana, and today I will be doing my reading wrap-up for the month of September. I will go ahead and get started with stats. I read a total of 9 books, 6 of which were eyeball reads, 3 of which were audio. I read a total eyeball page length of 1,933 pages, and that gave me an average of about 322 pages. My average star rating was a 4-star. One of the books I read this month I did not rate, and I will talk about that later. 2 of these books I owned before 2022. 3 of them I bought in 2022. 3 of them I got from the library, and 1 of them was from NetGalley. And then here is my genre breakdown. I don't want to go through the whole thing. You can see it. It's right here. You can see it. You can read. I believe in you. Before I get into my book-by-book breakdown, please consider liking and commenting on this video and subscribing to my channel if you like bookish things. This month, well, I guess September. It's already October. In the month of September, I participated in Becca's Bookopoly-thon. I have a video of me creating my TBR for that. If you are interested, I'll link it in the cards and down below. But this was my final digital Bujo spread for that. Let's zero in to the actual books I finished for this, and I will talk about them. So the book I read for the first roll of this was The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. It is a very short novel, so it's a very good one to pick up for a readathon. It is, I guess at the time, contemporary fiction. Me reading it now, it kind of feels like historical fiction. Ooh. But it follows a Cuban fisherman in the 1950s and his 3-day struggle with a tuna, which on its premise, I should not like this at all. I don't like fishing. I don't have any particular feelings towards 1950s Cuba, but something about the way Ernest Hemingway writes and puts a sentence together, I was enthralled. I was enthralled in the 3-day-long mad ravings of an old fisherman. And it just makes me really excited to pick up For Whom the Bell Tolls, because I feel like that's going to have more of a narrative to it than this does. This felt very dreamlike in a sense. I was just captivated the entire time. I guess there's a reason Ernest Hemingway, as notorious as he is and has garnered as much love and affection for his writing as he has, because it's incredible. It's so good. I don't know why I like it, but I love it. And I gave it like 4.5 stars. And I have no reason to like this book. There's no reason I should like this book. The next book I read for Bookopoly-thon is What Strange Paradise by Omar El Akkad. This is one I've been meaning to pick up for forever, so I'm so glad I was able to pick it up for this readathon. I got it in a book subscription box from an independent bookstore called Powell's. They no longer do their subscription box, but they seem to have some really great recommendations, and I am so glad I picked this up. This is another kind of contemporary general fiction following a young Syrian boy when he accidentally boards a ship immigrating from Egypt, where his family fled to a Grecian island, I'm assuming, in the Mediterranean to try to escape to the Western world. The ship ends up capsizing during a storm, and he, along with all of the other people on this ship, end up ashore of this resort island. And he runs away immediately to not get caught and gets found by this teenage girl, and they form an unlikely friendship. They don't speak each other's languages. They come from 2 very different cultures, but this young high school aged girl helps him try to escape to get to a safer, better place for him. And it's a very heartwarming story, but also very tense a lot of the time. It's very difficult to read. It's a very challenging story to read, but I think it was definitely worth it. Heavy, but so worth it, and so interesting and well put together. This author is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. And so he has an incredibly straightforward but gripping writing style that I think I just really vibed with, and this was a great start to my slightly smart girl September. The next book I read was Piranesi. This was a perfect transitional kind of summer to fall book for me. It's very medium academia. I wouldn't say it's like light academia or dark academia. It's just kind of like in the middle there. So kind of like you got that start of school feeling, but also a lot of the setting within this book is very oceanic. So you kind of got like that summer and fall vibe, which I think is perfect for, you know, beginning of September timeframe. I also just really enjoyed it a lot more than I thought it would. It follows a young researcher who is stuck in this giant mansion labyrinth kind of fantastical setting, and he is just figuring out what is going on. There are these crazy tides that flow through the hallways of this labyrinth/mansion, and to his knowledge there is only one other person within this world. We basically follow his journal entries as he kind of delves deeper into the mystery of this place, and it does get rather thrilling, but I don't want to discuss anymore because I would hate to spoil this incredible book for you. This was a easy 5 out of 5 stars for me. It's so good, and again, a nice little short book, and it was fun to be able to blast through some really good short books this month. For my next bookopoly roll, it was a mood read, and I don't really do mood reads. I mean, I guess kind of. I mean, I obviously read things I want to read, but I very much like having a list and a structure. So this is about the closest I'm gonna get to a mood read, and that is Throttled. I read this as a part of the Cliterature book club hosted by the Roomies Digest and a bunch of other people. From the name, you can tell it is a smut book club sort of situation, and they do these really fun live sprints where you all read the book together. This book, I mean, it's a smutty F1 racing romance. So that's pretty much all you have to know. I think if you enjoy the sport of F1 and you like a domineering love interest, you'll probably enjoy this and get an amount of enjoyment out of it. I think I just gave it like a solid 3. But I mean, I enjoyed it enough. It was fun. Probably not gonna reread it. Might continue on in the rest of the series because I think the other love interests will be more interesting, and I do enjoy the sport of F1, so that was kind of a fun thing for me to read about. And for my last roll of bookopoly, a big book, I read Map of Bones. This is the second book in the Sigma 4 series by James Rollins. I just released a full review on this book, so I won't really talk about it here because I just blathered on about it for like 20 minutes. The Sigma 4 series is a action thriller series following an elite force of the government who are highly skilled and highly educated. So basically, scientists with guns is the tagline, and it's a good time and I enjoy it. This one I didn't enjoy as much as the first one, so I ended up giving it 4 stars, but I love this series. I'm rereading the whole series. Started reading these when I was in high school. A lot of nostalgia, just a really good time. That was my bookopoly wrap up. I read all of the books for my rolls, and now I will jump into the other books I read this month. Starting with I'm Glad My Mom Died. I listened to this as an audiobook. It is narrated by Jeanette McCurdy herself, and it's as good as everybody says. It's darkly funny, and it's just a part of the early 2000s millennial, I think, in a lot of us, and dealing with the repercussions of the heroin chic era of body type and all of these super stick thin, not only women on screen, but children that we were basically forced to compare ourselves to. I think this is a really important book, and I think it will probably stand the test of time, much like Know My Name by Chanel Miller. I think this is just a very important memoir for a lot of people to read, and I think especially women of my age range. Very much recommend, and I especially enjoyed the audiobook. Jeanette McCurdy, being a trained actress, can really take you through this story that she has crafted herself in a way I think that really adds a lot to the story. The next book I also listened to was Punch Me Up to the Gods by Brian Broom. This was a memoir I listened to as a part of the Pride 365 challenge through my local library. They recommend 12 LGBTQIA books to read throughout the next year, starting in June, ending in June. This one I didn't connect to as much as I'm Glad My Mom Died, but I mean that makes sense considering it was written by a black gay man born in the late 70s, and I am none of those things. But it was still a really good read, challenged my internal biases as far as being a straight passing cis white woman, and I mean it was very good. It was very well written. This is the book I decided not to rate just because as someone who could not connect with the material, it was not really fair for me to rate this on any system or scale. I have chosen to opt out of that, but I do recommend it as a book to see people who connect to it or don't. Something I would like to talk about is I really enjoyed the way this was written. It's mostly a kind of long spanning memoir from Brian's childhood through his adulthood, but we also bounce to this kind of allegorical story he is telling of him being on a bus and witnessing a young father with his son on the bus. It is called The Initiation of Tuan, and that kind of short allegorical story is also woven into the chapters of the main memoir, and that story just kind of goes into, you know, the initiation of Tuan, his initiation into black manhood, you know, starting as young as I think Tuan is supposed to be like 3 years old or something. So it just really goes to show how prescribed our identities can be at such a young age. And I thought that was really, really fascinating to see that in such a direct story. I also really liked the perspective. I don't know if Brian writes from the perspective of his mother or if she herself wrote a chapter, but you get a chapter from the perspective of Brian's mother, her growing up, her situation. So you really get to see that generational trauma being passed down from his mother to him dealing with it, and then as well as kind of seeing that from an outside perspective in that initiation of Tuan stories. Very, very good. Highly recommend. A+. The next book I also listened to, a lot of audiobooks right in a row. That was The Lost Hero by Rick Riordan. I never know how to say his name. This is the first in the Heroes of Olympus series. It is the spin-off series from Percy Jackson, so it is following a new generation, not really a new generation, but just kind of a new set of demigods and heroes. I have read this one. I'm not quite sure how many. I can't remember if I finished the Heroes of Olympus series or not when it was coming out, but I did read this one right when it came out in 2010. So going back and listening to it was really fun for me, being able to kind of experience all those feelings again and just be really excited about something I'd been excited about, 12 years ago. So that was a good time, and I enjoyed it immensely. And then finally, one of the last books I finished in September was an arc of the Genesis of Misery by Neon Yang. I did not like this book. I'm just gonna come straight out and say it. This book was not my cup of tea. It is kind of apparently it's supposed to be a Joan of Arc kind of vibe. I was getting more of just kind of a biblical kind of allegory in general, but there is this young woman who is supposed to be this great messiah of this intergalactic empire. I'm having a really hard time explaining this plot because it was just kind of, not a lot happens, and you're just kind of dropped into the middle of the story. And there's all of these interludes of the people telling the story, and then you jump into like the first person perspective of Misery herself. Misery is the young woman who's the messiah. And this has been like 2 sci-fi arcs in a row that I just have not vibed with. And I'm beginning to wonder if like sci-fi is just not my genre. But like, I like sci-fi TV. Well, I like Star Trek. Mostly just like Star Trek Voyager. And if I'm really delving into that, I think I just like the women of Star Trek Voyager. So I might not actually be a sci-fi girly. I might just have to stick to fantasy and like contemporary and just kind of leave sci-fi in its own realm. So those are all of the books I read in September. I had a really great reading month with the exception of like one book. But please let me know your thoughts on any of the books I read or if you have any questions about the books I read. And thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next video.